Hi everyone, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today's video will be focusing on how to create a 4-tiered gathered skirt. It's super easy to create. You do need a ton of material, and how you cut it will be based on how wide your fabric is. My fabric was 60 inches, so it worked perfectly for me. So my waist is 30 inches, hips is 40. My length from waist to floor is 38 inches. So for the first tier, I went ahead and I cut two of the materials, both of which was 11 inches by 26. For the second tier, you'll need 2 pieces, and that one was 9 inch by 40 inch, gave me a total of 80 inches in width. For the third tier, I did 12 inches by 60 inches, giving me a full width of 120. For the fourth tier, I did 15 inches in length, 60 inches in width, giving me a total of 180 inches. Once you have all of your pieces cut out, you can use some sticky notes and just so that you are aware of which tier you're working in. But the next goal would be to attach those pieces per tier. So make sure that you are attaching the right ones to the right ones, otherwise it gets really confusing. Go ahead and grab some pins, and technically you're just going to be making huge circles. Now your seam allowance for this will be 1/2 inch. For my fabric, which was 60 inches, some of them I did not remove the selvage edge, so like that raw edge, I did not remove it. And when I attach it together, once I sew it, I'll just make sure that that seam allowance is 1 inch wide, like here, and then from there I'll just serge it off. Once you have it sewn, if you're going to zigzag stitch the raw edge or serge it, or use your pink shears, whatever you need to do to keep it from fraying, be sure to do that before you attach the actual tiers together. Quick tip for when I am serging, because it's technically like a continuous stitch and it can continue even without material being sewn underneath it. Usually I line it all up and I sew it all together. When I am done, I go ahead and I use my snippers to separate them, but I just make it all in one go. Now that you have your tiers connected as one and they're not individual, and they aren't individual pieces, fold them in half so that you find their center. You'll do that for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Now tier 4 is a little bit more complicated because you have 3 pieces. So for that, you'll keep 2 seams together, and then from those 2 seams, which will be your side seam, you'll pinpoint the front and the back. Once all those pieces are marked, you can go ahead and hem the 4th layer. For the hem, I went ahead and I rolled it 1/2 and 1/2. As you can see here, it's nice and flat. That's because I went and ironed it, okay? Ironing is your best friend. Go ahead and grab that iron and iron it flat. Once you iron it, you technically don't need the pins anymore because it will stay in place. But I like to have it there, just so that I can ensure that it's staying in place. 5 yards later, because that's how many yards it took, 180 inches is 5 yards. You would be done with the hem. Be sure to pull any threads. Try to clean up the material as you go, so anything that's fraying off, you can always trim it. That way in the end you don't have so much stuff to clean off. Now that you're done with that, you are ready to create your gathering stitches. Remember, when you are creating your gathering stitches, you create 2 basting stitch at the upper edge of the material. So 2 basting stitches, your widest width, which should be 5 millimeters, and from there stitch them all the way across. Make sure that they don't zigzag, and always stop before you get to your seam and extend that thread out so that you can tie it later. You're gonna do that for the top edges, or the top, yeah, I said it right, the top edges of tier 2, 3, and 4. If you need more information on how to gather, I did create a sample video on how to do it. I'll add the link down below, so be sure to take a look at it as extra resource, extra information, just in case you're getting confused on the process. But from there, the next thing for you to do is to actually pull those stitch lines so that you can scrunch the fabric together and create your actual gathers. The gathers will be created on the top layers of tier 2, 3, and 4. Tier 1 will be left as is, only because the top edge is where we're going to attach the actual elastic band to make the waistband. Now that tiers 2, 3, and 4 is all gathered at the top edge, you can go ahead and attach them to their actual side seam. Now remember, tier 1, 2, and 3 was cut out into 2 pieces, so technically you do have a side seam. So I would definitely start attaching it from there. Add your pins, make sure both seam allowances are facing the same direction, and then you can go ahead and attach it to where we had added the front and center back notch. From that point, go ahead and move your gathers around so that the wider area is matching to the smaller area. Be sure that your gathers are evenly spread out. Because we have a lot of material that we are working with, it might be easier for you to do each tier individually and then attach it to its adjoining tier. But it's up to you. If you have lots of pins and your material is not heavy, then by all means you can connect all of them with the pins first, connect all tiers with your pins first, and then continue to sewing it across. When you're sewing the gather, always try to keep your wider material, the material that's actually gathered, at the bottom so that the feed dogs are pulling it back and it's not being bunched up in the front. Every now and then, move your hand underneath the material so that you make sure that it's being straight and it's not folding over or doing anything strange underneath. So just double check the top and double check the bottom as you sew. Your seam allowance here should be 1/2 inch. You are going to repeat this same step for connecting tier 2 to tier 3 and tier 3 to tier 4 and tier 2 to tier 1. So once you have all of it attached, then you are ready to serge and clean off those fraying threads. Just like before, always make sure you serge or do something to those raw edge because it frays a lot. This material that I'm using is an acetate type of material. I had to test it to pinpoint what type of fabric it was because there's this lady that I normally just get fabric from. She gets them from local stores that are closing. I don't know how she does what she does, but I get some cool fabrics from her, okay? Oh God, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe she steals it. I don't know, but I buy them from her and they're always super good quality. And I'm gonna keep doing it. So yeah, just continue serging. You're gonna do that for all tiers. Once you are done, technically your garment is practically ready. The only thing we need to do is just do the waistline, add that elastic, and we are pretty much done. So let's get to it. Here's another tip for when you are serging. Always have the gathering material at the top. The one that's flat should be at the bottom, only because you have a better visual on what's going on. The serger has a tendency of pulling and pushing things in directions it doesn't need to be going. So if you keep your gathering material at the top, you have a better visual, and you can easily correct anything that, you know, could possibly going wrong. So when you're sewing, gathers go at the bottom for the feed dogs. Gathers, I keep them at the top when serging. So I always try to get the inside to look just as neat as the outside. As you can see, serging makes a world of difference. I mean, look at it. It looks clean. I love it. Now that everything is complete in the inside, we are ready to do our top stitching. When you are completing your top stitching, always make sure that you start from a seam. The width of the top stitching from the very edge, well, I guess you could kind of call it an edge stitch too. I'm literally doing it about, I would say, 1/4 of an inch. I did not measure it, I just simply eyeballed it. As you go through it, smooth it out. Make sure that there isn't anything that is being caught underneath it, and just sew all the way through. Before you start though, double check your bobbin. Make sure you have enough thread, because you don't want to be sewing halfway through and then next thing you know, you run out of thread. You gotta wind your bobbin again and then keep sewing. So before you start any new portion of your, you know, garment, you know, just regular tips. This is just a tip. Always double check your bobbin and make sure that you have more than enough thread to go all the way through with the seam or the stitch line that you are making. You are going to repeat this step for all of the layers, and then from that point that should leave you with just the waistband that we're gonna jump right into. The waistband that I'm using, it is 2 inches wide. I only had 2 pieces of it, so I had to go ahead and stitch it together. I did not fold it over, I simply overlapped it, and I made a huge rectangular shape right on it so that it wouldn't unravel or come apart. So a lot of people would like to do the zigzag stitch, which you can zigzag stitch right over the raw edges. That way they don't unravel, but I just used my straight stitch machine and I went ahead and did my full you know, perimeter stitch so that it wouldn't come apart. For the hem, for the waistline of the skirt, went ahead, used my iron just like before, folded over 1/2 inch. That way, once we fold that over the actual elastic band, it's nice and clean, it's a clean edge. Because my elastic band is 2 inches, we're gonna leave a little bit of an opening. Therefore, the fold over that we're gonna do, from this point, it will be 2.5 inches. Go ahead and fold your waistline over at 2.5 inches. Use your little gadget, whatever you need, whether it is a measuring tape or a ruler. That way you can pin it in place. And just pin. You're gonna do that all around the waistline. So first it's folded at 1/2, and then you're gonna fold it at 2.5 to have the actual width for your casing. You guys know I simply love to iron. Go ahead and iron it down, that way it lays nice and flat and you don't have to deal with any pins. Now, the 2 pins you are going to leave behind are where your opening is going to be, because that's where you're actually going to insert the elastic, right? So from the first pin, you're gonna back stitch to that pin and you're gonna follow the perimeter or the edge of your actual casing all the way around until you get to your secondary pin, and then backstitch, leaving the spacing in between the pins open. That way you can insert your elastic. Now remember, your elastic band is 2 inches, therefore you have to make sure that you are sewing relatively close to the edge. That way it doesn't cut into the actual spacing that you would need for your elastic, right? So your measurement, you should be sewing about 1/4 inch away from the folded edge of your casing. Go ahead and grab your elastic, and you can use a safety pin. You can use a safety pin, or if you have something you can pull the elastic through the casing with, then by all means, whatever you have at your disposal, go ahead and use it. And make sure that your safety pin is closed. You're going to pull the elastic through by just maneuvering that safety pin through the casing. Make sure that the elastic does not rotate, otherwise it becomes extremely difficult for you to flip it back over, and to make sure that it's facing the same direction all throughout the waistband. Take your time and just move it as you go. Once you've reached the ending and your elastic both ends are out, you can go ahead and just use your safety pin to put them together, and you're gonna maneuver the material evenly so that it gathers all around the elastic evenly. Make sure that the opening though and the endings are right at the opening of your casing, because we have not sewn it together. We're not gonna sew the elastic closed until we make sure that it's not twisted inside of the casing. This takes a lot of maneuvering, and it takes a bit of a patience. So take your time and make sure that it's not twisted, because if you close it and it's twisted, then you'll have to reopen it and it's a bit of a mess. So take your time and make sure that it's not twisted. If you need to, you can always pin it flat. It should look a little something like this once you're done. Once you know for sure that there isn't anything that's twisted inside, you can go ahead and close off your elastic. Just like we did before, we're gonna do a top stitching right on top of it so that it can close. But yeah, this waistband is looking super, super, super good. If you want, you can, well, once you close your casing, because you definitely have to do that first, go ahead and do your top stitching to close your casing. You can do just vertical lines on your waistband. That way you don't have any zigzag stitching straight across. The reason that we put those horizontal lines on the actual casings is so that your elastic doesn't flip and twist when you are wearing it. That drives me absolutely crazy. But I didn't do that. I went ahead and I put zigzag stitchings all the way across. When you are doing your zigzag stitching, make sure you stretch your material out. That way it's nice and flat. Do not just stitch straight across without pulling that material apart. You have to pull it apart and make it flat before you stitch it. The reason you stretch out the material is so that you're able to have an expansion when you put it on. If you don't stretch it out, you're going to stitch down those gathers, and as you can see, there's no elasticity. So start from where your seam is, sink your needle in, stretch out your material while you are holding it in the front and in the back, and go ahead and start stitching. You allow that needle to sink first before you let go and you continue to sew. You're going to do that all around without moving those gathers. You're simply stretching them from one point to another. You're going to do that all the way around the waist, and then you're going to do a secondary stitch at the bottom. The secondary zigzag stitch would be placed a half an inch from where we originally created our casing stitch. So this is what the waistband looks like. It kind of gives me the feel of like a top of a like sweat shorts or something. Well, not sweat shorts, but basketball shorts. It gives me the feel of basketball shorts at the top, which I'm okay with. If you don't want all of those zigzag stitch, again, you can always just do some vertical stitchings just to make it nice and clean. But from this point, the only thing that would be left would be to add belt hoops if needed, but I didn't add any belt hoops. This is an overall look on what the skirt looks like, and that is it. We are all done for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions at all, definitely drop them down below. I'll be more than happy to help. Now there will be a PDF attached at the bottom, so do check out the links so that you can have a written portion of how to put this skirt together. Like, share, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Happy sewing!